My name is Billy Ballingy. The purpose of this video is to discuss two resolutions that the Cedar Hill School Board passed. In our community, it is being described as a resolution to not increase property taxes for 10 years. At least that's what the questions that I'm fielding say. I'd like for us to discuss that resolution for a few minutes this evening. Number one, no school board can bind a future school board. In other words, this resolution has no binding effect whatsoever on future school boards. Why is that? Well, every year in May, 2, or in some years 3, school board members are elected. So in any given year, you may have 2 or 3 school board members, even if there's not a resignation or, God forbid, a death of one of the school board members. In addition to that, things change from year to year. You may have a charter school that opens and your enrollment decreases, or a charter school that fails and you have dramatic increase in the number of students in your district. Property values can fluctuate substantially, and that's how we fund our public schools to large measure. No school board can bind a future school board. So the resolution itself is not binding on anything that a school board in the future does. And let's face it, no one knows who will be on the board, who the superintendent will be, or what the economic conditions will be in Cedar Hill in 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years. My question to you is this: why would a school board pass a resolution purporting to say it will not increase taxes for 10 years, knowing that that resolution is not binding on any future board? Now, let's assume that it was binding. It is not, but let's look at its very terms, because what's being discussed in the public is just they're not going to raise taxes. Well, the resolution has multiple caveats that never seem to make it into that message. One of the caveats is that it assumes that the value of property in Cedar Hill increases every single year for 3 years. If there's a year that it doesn't increase by 3%, then that busts the resolution. It assumes that the laws of the state of Texas regarding school funding for the interest and principal that school districts pay does not decrease. It assumes that the voters of Cedar Hill do not approve a bond, whether that be a city bond or whether it be a school bond. And we know that the school board had on their agenda just this past April the discussion of a potential bond for our community. Bottom line, even if this were enforceable, and it is absolutely not, there are lots of different ways for the board to get out of it that never seems to have made it into much of the conversation so far. Now, let's assume the tax ratification election that is up for vote this Saturday, September the 8th, passes. If it passes, the citizens of Cedar Hill authorize any future school board, without ever coming back to us and asking again, to increase our property tax rate from a total of $1.54 per $100 of property ownership to $1.67 per $100 of property ownership. If it passes, Cedar Hill ISD has, as a result of lowering that tax rate, going to be running a deficit budget. In other words, they're not going to be taking in as much money as goes out in their debt service. That's how they pay their debts, sort of like a mortgage payment. It's the way they pay their debts. If this passes, because they've lowered a section of their taxes so much, they will not be able to pay off the debt that they have. Currently, they have about $120 million in interest $120 million in principal that is owed, and $140 plus million in interest. More interest than principal is owed by Cedar Hill ISD. We pay that interest. It is to our benefit that the principal be paid off, because that will save us millions and millions of dollars in interest. If this passes, Cedar Hill will not be able to pay off its notes when it can in 2019 or in 2022, costing us many, many, many millions of dollars in interest. Now, if the proposal fails, if you vote against it and the majority vote against the tax ratification election, then Cedar Hill will get a raise, because property values are increasing. They will take in more money because of that. They can pay off the debt that is callable in the near future, the debt that they can pay off. They can pay off all of their debt in 2019, and they can pay off an $18+ million debt in 2022. They can't do that if it passes. And finally, if it fails, if you vote against it, then they can also give us a tax rate decrease. So they can do it all. They can get a raise, they can pay off debt, and we would be entitled to a decrease in taxes. This Saturday, September the 8th, is Election Day in Cedar Hill. It is for Cedar Hill ISD's tax ratification election. I have already voted against it in early voting. Please don't let this resolution convince you to vote for it. I encourage you to vote against it so we can get a property tax rate reduction. We can pay off the debt and save us in interest, and Cedar Hill will get a raise as well. Please vote against on September the 8th.